Um, and this part for me is really one of the most powerful retention tools that an employer can have in their pocket. It's the ability to say, like, okay, this is what I pay for this position.
Welcome to At the Fence Line with your hosts, Sarah Chambers and Gavin Benker. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to At the Fence Line with Sarah and Gavin. Today, we are going to continue our two-part series on compensation. Well, Sarah is going to continue her two-part series on compensation, and I'm going to be along for the ride, adding
Mhm.
a little bit here and there. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Gavin. Yes. So, to everyone listening, if you are feeling annoyed at the sound of my voice after the last episode, it's going to be worse today. So, I don't know, like, skip past this one or don't. The content's good.
The content's going to be great. Yeah. So do you want to jump right in or do you want to, how's your internet today?
Yeah, I know the struggles, eh? Takes a couple minutes to get set up sometimes. The internet has me fired up today, but I think we've got it now.
Video looks
I'm ready to
good.
rock.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Right on.
I'm
Yeah.
ready. I'm ready to rock. I think we're good to go. Yeah, so welcome everybody. Thanks, Gavin, for the intro. So, for those of you who didn't listen to last week's episode or last episode, you're maybe just trying to cheat the system and skip right to the meat and potatoes of it. What we talked about last time was compensation philosophy. So, Gavin took us through the three key alignments and how strategy, management, finance, all of these things need to be in balance. They all impact each other. And at all times, any of the decisions that you're making, you should be considering all of those three elements. Designing our compensation system, I think I'm going to say that word 20 times today, is absolutely no different. You need to think about management, finance, strategy. So go back, listen to how to develop the strategy piece, but it's going to tie into the conversation still today as we go forward. So that was last time. And now we're going to go through, like I said before, kind of the meat and potatoes of it a little bit more the practical framework, less of the strategy piece. Yes, Gavin, go.
Well, and then we touched on it last week or last episode, the tie into finance. And we're going to do a little bit more of that today as well, towards the end of the
Yes.
episode. So if you want to skip to the good stuff, you could go to the end of the episode.
How dare you, sir? That is I wouldn't recommend it though. But anyway, so yes, but before we kind of build that framework or start getting into that, I'll say just little asterisks. My assumption is that you already have your org chart built. You've already got roles defined. You've already done your mission, vision, values. Um, those are just assumptions that I make when I'm going into this process, unless I've built it with people. And then what I'm going to talk about today is kind of the all in. It's, depending on your team makeup, some of the elements may or may not be necessary. I mean, I think it's all necessary. My mentality is always build it now. And then you just have to apply it into the future. So I'm not going to give you a number of like, this becomes relevant when you have X number of employees. No, it can be relevant at any time, no matter how big your team is. It will be especially relevant, though, if you are thinking about growth for your farm into the future.
I have a question for you,
Hmm.
if you don't mind.
Go for it.
The things you mentioned that you should have in place before starting this, the
Yeah.
org chart, mission, vision, and values and stuff. I just want
Mhm.
to quickly ask about budget. Do you recommend having an idea of a budget first, or maybe doing the compensation philosophy first, then seeing the effects of it budget wise, and then maybe making adjustments and doing a little bit of a back and forth? Any recommendations on that?
I think that build it first and then see how it fits in with your budget. I think that through going through the process of building it as well, um, its value will maybe be like, I think if you asked any farm to make a budget for HR before really understanding some of the value of the pieces that I'm going to talk about, they probably wouldn't be willing to commit very much to it. But
I,
in going through the process of building it, I think its value becomes better. So you might be willing to spare
I
a few
like
more
that.
dollars towards your HR.
I like that. And because I think if you go into it with a constrained budget, then you might design it with these constraints in mind and
Yeah.
let it run its full course and the benefits of all of that. And then that doesn't mean you have to do it that way, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
On the same page.
Um, So, the process that I'm going to talk about again, the sort of all in is building pay bands. And so you like salary bands for different roles on your farm. Um, that you've already developed the rules. So it's about figuring out now how much you're going to pay people for the work that they do, for the contributions that they make to your business. So, um, okay, so I'm going to kind of dive in. So again, we've made our assumptions and what you already have in place, and now we're going to talk about how to actually build these bands out. The first step is using the roles that we've defined, that we've built, and rating them. So you can use a job factor rating system to assign points for various factors for each of the roles that you've built. Okay. The rating is meant to help describe what skills are required for the job. So you're not rating the person that's currently filling that role, you're rating the role itself. Okay. So an example of that would be communication. You could have scores like 1 to 5 for communication. A score of 1 could say that communication is really just limited to contacts within the organization for sort of routine communication. Whereas if you were to rate a 5 for that role, it might be extensive communication with contacts outside of the organization, high value, high risk kind of communication. If you were to look at supervision, like 1 maybe is someone who has absolutely no supervisory responsibilities, where a 5 could be like supervising big groups of people or even supervising higher level employees. Okay, so the point here again is that we are evaluating the role itself and that we're using factors that we decide on that are common for every role. So for every single role, you're going to have decided your factors and then you're rating the factor per role. Okay, we need to compare apples to apples. And that's going to help us build out those bounds later. So, the examples that I just used were 1 to 5, but depending on the job factor, you might go up to a 6 or a 7. Okay, so um, for example, if let's say you worked at a university and you were hiring professors, education, you would probably have a 6 or a 7 because you're going to be more detailed about the different steps of what education somebody needs to come into that role having. Whereas, for a farm, you're probably going to have a 6 or 7 on things like experience, um, physical effort of the job, things like that. Does that make sense so far, Gavin?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay.
One
Okay.
to five. Yeah. You can, I guess, would you allow a farm? Oh, we want to use 1 to 10 instead because we want to get a little bit narrower. It's the idea of defining it and then attaching some rating to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So once you have then rated all the different factors for the different roles that you have, you're doing some, math and figuring out the minimum and maximum number of points for each band. And then all of the roles will fall into the band based off the ratings that you did. It's a
Mhm.
little bit challenging for me to just like explain this because it's like bleep, bleep, bloop into the Excel document and things get spit out, formulas or in the background. And I can't give it all away, right? Like that, I'd be out of a job if I just told everybody how to do everything on this podcast. So math happens, numbers come out, and it's magic. So that is that first step. Um, but now we need to put dollar values to it. Okay,
Oh, this is
so
the good stuff. Yeah.
I guess so. I don't so now we've rated the roles based off of the factors, we've divided them into bands, and now we need to figure out what are we gonna pay people within each band. So, the first step for me of that, is to do research to, see what other people are paying, what your competitors are paying, competitors being other farms in your area and even other industries, okay? So,
Mhm.
um, it's a little bit of art, that gets thrown in here, not just pure math anymore. Because the other thing we kind of need to recognize is that the way your neighbor defines a farm manager might be different than the way you define it. So even if we're, doing research on what other people are paying for similar roles, there's not always enough information to make sure that, again, we're comparing apples to apples. So that's when we might start to look to other industries, especially when it comes to like administrator or finance roles. That's where I really like to go to other relevant industries to do some comparisons.
Is this maybe where you could also bring in some of the strategy elements that you've kind of defined, some of the mission, vision, values on your farm, what you stand for? I'm thinking, do you want to be a farm that pays a little bit more so that strategically you have less turnover, which can have benefits, right? But that's a bit of a strategy decision instead of just looking at what's out there.
Absolutely. And I think I mean, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as well, because
Oh,
I think
okay.
that combines with some of the other rewards that you might be looking at for
Uh-huh.
people on your
Mhm.
farm. Is That's another really great place where you can apply your values and your strategy. But yes, definitely. I mean, if you've got, well, we're going to talk about it later. It's like, what are you rewarding? What behaviors are you trying to reward? Um, but yes, so we're looking at what other people are paying. That's kind of step 1. And then step 2 is to look at what is the farm currently paying compared to the research, and then seeing if we're aligned with our compensation philosophy. So we need to know about the market first, and then apply that to how we're going to pay. Are we, like you said, are we as competitive as we want to be? But also, does our base wage leave enough room to offer the kind of benefits that we want to tie into our values, which is what you were just talking about? I
Mhm.
mean, if we're paying right at the top, yes, we're being super competitive, but are we able to offer things like performance bonuses or professional development, reimbursement, things like that, that might really speak to who we are as a business, if we're just maxing out on wages. So, once we've kind of figured that out, where do we stand within the market comparative to where we want to stand within the market? Then we can build out mins and maxes for each pay band. And that's what's going to tell us, what does somebody get paid for each role. You still with me?
Still with you. And
Okay.
are the bands where you can give bonuses and stuff, or is that separate in
No,
this system?
separate later.
Okay. Yeah.
You hurting for a bonus or what? You're like locked in.
Well, when you said min and max, so I was just wondering if
Mm,
someone's at the min, does the bonus go up to the max? But we're just talking salaries here.
we are just talking about base wages, just salaries,
Hourly
whatever.
wages or salaries. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and when I build it, I like to set up both right away, like, what is the equivalent for an annual salary to the hourly wage, so that you're kind of prepared for those conversations already. Um, yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
So would you move the bands with inflation? Like if you wanted to track inflation, would you move the bands with inflation, or would you let them sit there for a little while and then every so often adjust the whole band?
Oh, inflation, yes. So inflation gets to be a little bit. I, um I don't recommend people adjusting, like, I would recommend adjusting as needed. Okay?
Mm,
So, what if you are like, I want people to pay not so much at the bottom of the barrel that they need to do an inflationary increase every
mm,
single year. Um, the other challenge you get into is like, inflation for what? Because the numbers that are put out, like, are not, what I'm paying this year for an apple compared to what I paid last year. Is that what's driving my salary? I find inflation to be just so variable depending on kind of who you're talking to and what you're talking about. And then it gets into lifestyle conversations as well.
mhm.
Um, like, I don't really care if as an employer, if the cost of cigarettes has gone up $5, I'm not paying you $5 more, but then who am I as the employer to try and dictate the things that you spend your money on? I don't love the inflation conversation. I want people to be paying enough that employees are able to withstand, a little bit of variance in the economy, assuming nothing drastic, tragic happens. Um,
I love that answer because I think if you do it all the time, then it becomes expected as well, right?
yes.
Yeah.
And then how silly, because if you're building into your compensation model that you need to give an inflationary increase of whatever percent every year, well, so you're budgeting for that amount. Why don't you use it as more of a reward system that will help with employee engagement?
Mm,
Because all you're doing by calling it an inflationary increase is making people angry because it's not the same as the cost of, that gas has gone up. You know what
right.
I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
Not very
sense. Yeah.
strategic.
No, no. There's other things that you could tie those bands to instead of inflation, like more important things
Yes.
like your values and your goals and stuff. Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes, absolutely. So back to it. So what the step that we've just kind of gotten to is we've put a dollar value to the mins and maxes of our various pay bands. Um, and that to me, when I'm doing this process with farms, I find that we do that and they're kind of like, okay. And I'm like, no, 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 we got to stop here for a second and really think about how powerful this is. Because, and I nerd out over compensation. Okay. You're the ratio guy. I absolutely love building compensation systems. But so when we have these mins and maxes for the different pay bands, think about hiring an employee. How
Okay.
do
We'll take
you
it.
currently decide right now what to pay that employee? What's your framework for decision making?
Oh, I think I'd have my roles defined and I'd have some
No, no,
bands.
you're not that good. So
Oh,
just you got to play into it and say no, you don't know. You wait to see what they offer. You look at what your neighbors are offering. Sorry, wait to see
oh,
what they ask for.
as low as legally possible.
There you go.
Minimum
That's another
minimum
fun one.
wage. Minimum wage all the time.
So okay, so let's say that you don't have a great system right now. You're kind of like fly by the seat of your pants kind of guy when it comes to what you're going to offer people, or your favorite move is to say, what would you like to get paid? And then negotiate $2 lower an hour or some silly thing. Now you've got an entire framework to work within where you can say to the person, we are hiring for like an equipment operator, and this is what we pay for that role. That's so powerful. Like, take all of that anxiety, the emotions, all of that away, and you're just like, "This is what we pay for that role." And I mean, we're gonna get into budgeting for it and things like that later, so that this is why we pay what we pay becomes even more powerful later. But I love the practical application of the pay band system. I love especially as like I do recruitment with farms, so often I'm asking them that question, "What do you wanna pay for this position?" And it's like, I don't know, what are other people paying? Well, now you get to say, this is what we pay for that role. And so then once we were able to say like, what are we going to pay for that role? Then we get to talk about how do people move amongst the bands? How do they get paid more? What does that look like on your farm? Um, and how are we going to approach that situation when it comes up? And so that's kind of the, next sort of piece of what we move into. Um, but yeah, I always like to pause there and really recognize the mental load that there is when deciding what you're going to pay someone and how having this framework system takes away so much of that. Have you ever been responsible for making offers before to people or like negotiating pay?
Yeah. Uh-huh. I have. Yeah. Not a ton in my
Yeah.
career, but yeah, I have. Yeah. Usually the roles that I've been looking for, there's already there. I was joking earlier about having it already. There were already some frameworks and some concepts, at least, if not fully filled out, at least some loose concepts and frameworks. So yeah, having some preparation certainly helps. Absolutely.
What
And
role was that? What job was that for you?
when I worked at the window and door plant, I
Mhm.
would interview and hire employees there, and it was unionized, so very clear
Mm.
compensation structure already negotiated and filled out. But there were bands, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and then we do performance reviews and increase or decrease. No, not decrease. It was only ever increasing paid based on performance. And when else have I hired? Well, at Baxworth, I've been involved with developing and interviewing people. So I've never been the absolute final say on that, but I've been involved. And I'd
Mhm.
like to think that we have a pretty good system developed as well. So I've never gone through with a farm developing a compensation philosophy where there hasn't been one. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm certainly learning today. So this is great.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So like I said, now we've put our dollar value on the mins and maxes of the pay bands, and the next step is to decide what someone needs to do to move amongst the bands. So now this is when things are getting kind of a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more detailed, because we're not just talking about the role in general and what's required to be successful in that role. We're talking about like individual characteristics that somebody needs to have to advance themselves in the business. And really, like, so when I build this out again, it's a whole table. There's lots of words, and we're talking about the different bands, what we expect from each, what are the different characteristics that are going to move someone from, a worker position to supervisory to manager to lead. Um, so at this point, we're really combining the job factor rating that we did earlier with the job description, which is like what's expected of this role, with the characteristic expectations that we see in the different kind of role categories in our business. Um, and this part for me is really one of the most powerful retention tools that an employer can have in their pocket. It's the ability to say, like, okay, this is what I pay for this position. Let's say you're at a feedlot. This is what I pay for a like cattle worker position. And even though I don't have a herd manager role available, there's still an opportunity to keep upping your wages. Here are the characteristics that I'm looking for to make that happen. I see a lot of businesses and even some farms where they build out these pay band systems, and an employee's doing really well and they get to the top of the band really quickly, and then they want more money, and the employer's like, sorry, like, you're at the top of the band, I'm not willing to pay any more for this role. What a missed opportunity. Like, what? Imagine you've got an employee who wants to do more. I mean, we're assuming here that this employee wants to do more and they're willing to work for more money. And you're
Mhm.
like, "Sorry, you're at the top of the band, like, here, you're limited." I mean, how soul crushing. So I am, like, yet to meet a manager in any business who doesn't have too much on their plate and things that they wish that they could leverage. So even if you don't have that role open, um, if you've got a good employee, like, why not start teaching them some new skills? Why not, allow them to get paid more to take some things off of your plate? Like, it's just a no-brainer for me. It's that question of what would you do more of if you had more time, right?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
I'm noticing you're having a strategically timed sip of coffee.
Mhm.
Um, so do you suggest then, fairly wide bands then to allow for more of that motivation and more of that room for increases based on performance and characteristics?
Not necessarily, because I think if the band gets too wide, then you lose some of that focused strategy for, like, why it was what it was in the first place, right?
Okay. Okay. What about the potential for overlapping bands? Can you have someone at a lower position making more than someone, say, at the start of a medium or higher position?
100%. I mean, sometimes people will fit the role description, so we hire them, but we know that there's skill gaps that they still need to overcome. So yeah, 100%, you can be bringing someone on your team when they're, lower than maybe technically they should be, and that's where that overlap would come in 100%. Or again, you can have an equipment operator that's just like willing to do more and more and more, and so he or she are showing more skills in some of these other band areas. It's just outside of what you would expect of their role.
Okay, and then one more quick question.
Yeah.
What how does this apply to, or how do you apply this kind of band thing to employees who aren't all that motivated, who don't really jump at new opportunities, they're content? Can you use it somehow to help that?
Well, I'm gonna be picky on the words that you just said, where you said, "Is there
Okay.
something you can do to help that?" And for me, I think it's totally fine to have somebody who's like good at their job, happy with everything, booping along. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that's something we need to help or fix. Like I literally talk to people, employees of farms, where they're like, I don't want more money. I don't want more responsibility. I, I'm just happy right where I'm at. Such a beautiful thing, like really a beautiful thing.
Don't
So
fix what isn't broken, right?
yeah, exactly, and that can be that can be dependent on a lot of different things. Most often, I'll say I see it with people that are maybe nearing the end of their career. They're, like, happy they're just happy where things are at, they're not looking for a lot of change, they're grateful for stability, um, and so I think that, that's not something that needs to be fixed. Absolutely, that person can stay where they're at if they're, fulfilling the requirements of the role, then, yeah, like you said, don't fix what isn't broken. But when you do have that employee who is trying to grow, trying to do more, looking for opportunities to earn more, um, why not? Why not show them what else they could have? Help them sort of build the path to get there, figure out that journey for them, what more looks like. Pay them fairly on their journey. Don't just because they're in training doesn't mean that they shouldn't be paid for that. Um, and what are you gonna have at the end of the day? You're gonna have an employee that has more skills than what they came to you with, you're able to leverage more to them. And depending on what they've learned along that journey about themselves, what areas of the business they like to be in, what skills they have, whether it be leadership or, technology, other skills that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to look at. Now you're just like opening up 10 more side quests for them. It's like, okay, I've arrived. I did the training for the thing that we talked about, and that's not the end either. It's like now that opens up 10 more doors within your business. So that to me is so important for retention. That's what people that are growing their career and their skills, that's what they want, is to feel like opportunities are endless. Um, and what's that stat now that people, I don't know, like millennials and younger are going to change careers like 3 times minimum within their working lives or something now, at least 3. Have you heard the stat?
I haven't, but I think I've heard something like that. I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
like the
3 or 5 or whatever,
yeah,
yeah.
it might or 10, who knows, like the concept though of people, starting at your business and just staying there for the duration of their career is it's becoming more and more uncommon for that to happen. So if you can create other opportunities for other things, then you absolutely should. I went on a bit
Mhm.
of a side quest there. I get excited. Okay, so we have where we're at in this process. We've evaluated our roles. We compared apples to apples with our job factors. Then we figured out which band each belongs in. Then we did some research to see what are other people paying, compared that to what we're paying, put dollar values to our bands, and then decided what competencies are required to move amongst the bands. There's
And
2 steps left.
then we're oh, I was gonna say we're all done. 2
Absolutely
steps left.
not.
Okay.
Not a chance. But wait, there's more. Okay. So before I kind of turn it over to, the boring part, the budget. I want to talk about about bonuses and rewards. I touched on it a little bit in the last episode, but I do want to talk about it now as well. Um, I think a lot of people want to include rewards, but they don't necessarily put a lot of thought to it. So, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about implementing some kind of a bonus structure or reward structure for a compensation plan, I want you to really think about why you're giving that bonus. What are you trying to reward? There's tons of psychology behind the carrot, the stick, whatever. And people have a lot of different feelings about it that are valid, but I want you to think about, what am I trying to reward? What behavior do I want to reward? And then again, of course, how can I live my values through the compensation system that I'm building? So, for example, farms that maybe have faith in their values, they might give a Christmas bonus. Farms that maybe live in an area with like a lot of competition for employees, they might include a retention bonus. So, like, if you've been here for 3 years, we give you this much. When it goes up to five, on and on and on. But I do believe that everyone who is using bonuses, reward systems should include a performance bonus. And there's lots of different ways to kind of structure that. Like the dollar value piece of it, it could be like, I'm going to do a 13th check. I mean, I think everybody kind of does twice a month payments now, but it could be an extra paycheck for salaried employees or an averaged extra paycheck for, your wage people. Um, it could be based off of an annual budget that your farm has set. Maybe you've decided that like every year we just want to give X towards our employee bonuses. Or you could have like the same amount set, like each employee is entitled to up to $2,000 if they, get 100% on their bonus evaluation. So lots of different ways to chop and change it. But no matter how you structure it, you really need to communicate how you're evaluating people. Okay. You don't need to communicate the dollar value always. Um, especially if it's like an annual budget per year. But you do need to tell people how you're evaluating them. What are the things you're evaluating and why?
When you say you don't need to communicate the dollar value, they're going to know the dollar value when they get the performance bonus. Do you mean they don't need to know what the calculation was?
Yeah, so I have like I mean again, so I have farms that I've worked with that they've got a very generous bonus system. It's like tens of thousands of dollars that they budget each year. And
Mhm.
so I don't think that your employee group needs to know that number.
Yeah. Mhm.
Especially if your budget is based off of farm performance, then it's going to be variable. One year it's X, the next year it's Y. That gets really confusing. So in that case, I don't think that people need to know what the budget is. If you're gonna like put it in your employee manual though, that everyone could get up to $2,000 per employee, I think it makes a lot of sense to say it then.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, cool. Um, so yeah, so what are the things that we're evaluating and why? And make sure the things that you're evaluating are actually realistic. Okay. Make sure that they're things you're willing to measure.
Mhm.
You can't evaluate people on something if you're doing this like annual process and then you only think about the last 3 months of their performance because you forgot to keep track the rest of the year. So, I don't normally measure things that you're gonna have to keep a diary, of employee performance, but depending on how invested you are in your system, I guess, I don't know, different strokes for different folks. And then I recommend always doing 2 check-ins in a year. So one is just kind of the informal, still formal, but not for a dollar amount check-in. So you're using the same process. You're running through the different areas that you've told people you're going to evaluate them on. You sit down with them, you let them evaluate themselves, and then you are going to evaluate them, or the, person who does performance evaluations on your farm is going to evaluate them as well. And then you're going to talk about where the differences are between the two. Um, that is going to be the basis for your scoring. That will be the basis for goal setting that they might want to do. And just like the most incredible opportunity for you to sit down and talk about where your expectations are either being met or not met when with regards to like an employee's performance. So that's the first sit down. The second one should be like 4 to 6 months later, and that's the formal one for all the marbles. That's, when there's going to be the dollar value attached, but the important thing is that you've done it some months later so that they've had time to actually work on the things that you asked them to. With the grain farms that I work with, I normally say that, after seeding is a good time to do that first informal one because you've just gone through this, like, crazy push time. So some pressure points might have come up with communication, attitude, just general performance. So
Mhm.
it's a good time to check in, and then don't do the other one until like the end of the year. So after harvest, yeah, that's what I recommend for performance reviews. Do you have any questions?
Well, it's not really a question, but I know that pardon me. I know that you and I have had some discussions and perhaps a little bit of disagreement over how much of a compensation plan should be tied or a bonus, calculation should be tied to farm performance or not. And I think you're starting to win me over. So I'll just I'll mention that, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but you're more in favor of not having so much tied to the farm's performance. Is that I've remembered
Yep.
that correctly? Yeah. And I was just kind of sitting here and listening to all the reasons that you explained and why they're important for an employee to understand how they're behaving and how they're performing. That should be the biggest part of how they get a bonus or not. If they're owners, right? Which
Mm.
sometimes there's going to be owners that are employees and employees that are owners. In fact,
Uh-huh.
quite a bit. But the farm's kind of financial performance can be another significant piece that's tied to ownership, and that's where a different set of risks and values and strategies and all that stuff come into play. If it's an employee, like, yeah, it's going to be really great in a good year, but it's not going to feel so good in a bad year,
Hmm.
and they're not the ones financially invested, right? So, um,
Yes.
yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe a
And
bit,
I'm,
right? But you know,
yeah.
but yeah.
And I mean, what you and I have spoken about in the past, just to kind of be clear, is more of the harvest bonus. So not that you shouldn't not that I would say don't budget for bonuses based off of business performance because, certainly if things are really tight, then I'm not going to tell you that I think it's a good idea to pay out like $1 million in bonuses that year. But it's more that I've seen farms that structure it where the bonus is based off of a percentage of revenue that from that year's crop. And I really don't like that because there's too many things in that I think the employee can't control. Um, so yes, so that is what Gavin specifically is referring to there. Um, so yeah, so that is really, I mean, it's a lot to talk about with a compensation system. It's a lot of work to do. I've, obviously condensed it here for the purposes of, the platform that I'm talking about it on, but um I really love how practical it is to apply a compensation system to employees, to decision making, to all that kind of good stuff. Any opportunity to remove, because I think like HR working with people it's emotional. Where people are emotional. We're dealing with feelings where, it's hard to separate those things. And so I am all for building and implementing tools for your business that remove the emotion, remove, some of the just mental load of managing people. And so I think that this is one of them. And it's not to say that you can't break the rules. Of course you can, because people don't fit into neat little boxes. So they don't always fit into neat little bands. It's absolutely, we build frameworks knowing that there might be situations where we go outside of them, but at least you've got somewhere to start. At least you have this like structure for decision making that you can fall back on. Um, so like I said, I love it. This is my favorite part. This and disciplinary, which is like what are
So
the two hardest things?
have your compensation philosophy so that you don't have to so it helps prevent trouble and then potential discipline. But then when it comes to it, you're there. You're ready to
I'm
do that
there.
one too.
Like,
Yeah.
what are the things that everybody else thinks are the worst to do? Just call me. I love it. No, so that's it. That's what I would recommend. But then, of course, the big piece, and this is where I call Gavin when I'm doing this work with farms. I'm like, okay, Gavin, we've built the whole thing. Now, can they afford it?
Hmm.
That's where
Yeah.
you come in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we talked about it earlier in the episode, going through it a little bit blank slate helps you design it for the right reasons. And then, yeah, we got to do a check. We'll have to do a check and then maybe make some adjustments. But yeah, I just want to bring up a few pieces that how it ties into the financial component because we did talk about a lot of how the design um, tries to promote achieving your goals and vision and consider strategic motivators and factors. So we talked about the tie into strategy. The tie into finance is Yeah, I don't know. You think it's more boring. I can see how a lot of people might, but it's also a little bit more tangible, right? It is what it is, right? The numbers don't lie. So
I think a
when it
budget in
comes,
any situation in my life is boring. Like, I don't ever wanna talk about the budget. So, I know a lot of people feel differently though. Sorry, I
yeah, it's okay.
interrupted.
We are just wired differently because
Yeah.
I love doing budgets and doing ratio analysis and helping farmers understand what those numbers mean, how they can get better. And then when it comes to how to tie that into the HR, to go talk to Sarah.
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to ratio analysis and compensation, a couple things. So you would find the impact of your compensation plan on your income statement. And then through your income statements over the years, through your performance, you'd see the effects of them on your balance sheet. So, how retained earnings, equity, growth of the farm over time, you're going to see that on the balance sheet. But a little bit shorter term, right? Year by year basis. And I'll talk about even shorter than that. We'll talk about cash flow in just a second. But on an annual basis, um, your crop or livestock revenues minus your production expenses, so seed, fertilizer, and chemical, feed, vet fees, all that type of stuff. That's your gross margin. So we're not talking about gross margin. That's the efficiency of the farm in turning your inputs into your outputs. So we haven't touched wages yet, but wages fall under the next category of variable expenses, which are operating expenses. So things like fuel, repairs and maintenance, freight and trucking, um, fence repairs, stuff like that. For I got to talk about our livestock clients a little bit. Can't just stay in the grain industry. So but this is where there's an important distinction. So there's one kind of key thing I want to share with the audience. So in those operating expenses, that's where your labor and your operational wages should go. So if you've got an operator, an equipment operator, or hired hand, seasonal help, your outside work, you could say, or your shop work, the non-office work, non-management work, all of the labor that goes into running the farm and doing the actual farming. That's where that should go. And so what I'm getting at is I see a lot of farms that don't split up their wages or salary expense into those farm activities and then management activities. And you should, because management activities should go down in the fixed or admin and overhead expenses. It's not. It's not. You'll kind of miss the mark, or you won't have the most accurate information on how operationally efficient your farm is if you put management wages up there, which is the most common way I see of that maybe being mixed up, is that some of the management wages, time spent in the office, time spent planning, doing compensation design philosophy, having annual reviews, all that kind of stuff. That's management work. That's not the farm's operational capacity to generate revenue or to generate a contribution margin. So that's one thing I wanted to share. It's just and as close to tracking it as you can get. Does not have to be down to the 15-minute interval, but if you've got someone who does some management and some outside farm work, you can do it on a percentage basis. You can do it, but you can also, if you want to, you can track it hourly. That would be even better. So that's one. And then the last thing I wanted to share just quickly, and I've got to be a little bit careful when I get into this one because I'm not a tax expert, but this will often have tax implications. So just kind of asterisk or disclaimer. But I want to talk about dividends for a little bit because dividends are a form of compensation, but they should be tied to return to ownership. So that would be even a little bit more long-term, big picture type thinking. What are the different risks that are involved in owning the farm and those decisions that impact growth or whatever? So dividends, and they don't have to happen every year, but they are a return to ownership. So you actually wouldn't see that on your income statement. So your net income, that should be a reflection of the farm's operations. including the management decisions, right? So this is now the next level of splitting out where compensation hits on your financial statements. Dividends, not on the income statement, from the balance sheet, from out of they come out of retained earnings. So just a couple of quick things, and then oh, right, I forgot one. So I said I was going to talk about a little bit shorter time frame than a year. So you can make a budget on an annual basis, right? You've gone through the design, you've come up with your compensation budget. Now you should cash flow it, right? And it will typically, maybe with the difference of a bonus, might not be split out amongst across the whole year. That might be in a certain season or a certain time of year. Typically at the end of a year, typically, right? But your monthly wages and your monthly salary expense will be fairly steady, outside of perhaps some seasonal help that you might bring on. And so then that goes into your cash flow budget, and make sure that you have a cash flow budget so that you can pay for all the operating expenses, which includes the compensation and the wages. So you would see that in those areas. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share from the financial piece. Did you have any follow-up questions for me?
Hmm. No,
Okay.
I think you did a great job.
Well, yeah, it has an impact both ways, right? The farm's performance will. Well, we talked about that already, right, throughout the episode, where it can come into play during bonus decisions, where it can set the kind of the boundaries on the budget for compensation. So
hmm
yeah,
I think it also, when you run, like if you do a projection on an increase in wages, or, if you've invested the time to build out a system like this, and then you're trying to think about the impact that it's going to have. I think running this as a scenario is also, it's always a great idea, because often it makes you realize that the number looks big when we're talking about it, because I mean, we have a hard time, especially if we're talking about oh my goodness, management salaries, then it's like, "Ah, we can't take that much money. We can't pay ourselves like we're worth." I don't know why, but that's how people often feel. And then when you actually look at the impact on your business and on, a lot of those ratios, it is often not as dramatic as people think it is.
yeah, and we're talking about a specific example that we did just a couple weeks ago, and I should have used a little bit more, perhaps, of examples. So that's great. If you give me just a couple more minutes. So Sarah and I were talking about the financial impact of a compensation system that she was designing for a fairly large farm. So we're talking thousands of acres. I don't want to get too specific so that people don't kind of maybe figure it out, but thousands of acres and several $1 million of gross revenue, but then, right, lots of expenses, and salaries being one of them. And so when Sarah was looking at what are the different potential total salary costs for this farm, looking at some different numbers. And yeah, they were big numbers. This farm employs quite a few people. And so we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in either operating and management salaries. And so that sounds like it is big number, because this is a big farm, and bigger farms have, right, lots of big numbers on their income statement. But when we ran the impact through our software program that can show and visibly show the impact of these different, I'm going to use bands, but I know it's not the right word, but the different budget amounts of this farm that this farm was thinking about. Yeah, the impact wasn't so large.
Farmcastersoftware.com.
I should just say it
Farmcaster-software.com. I
more
know.
often. Yeah. Well, it's a Backswath podcast, so
Yeah, that's okay.
yeah, it's a great program. It's a great program for looking at it visually and seeing the impact of these decisions.
And
So
so that really helped for them to be able to see what
yeah,
the financial impact was, on some of their, like, they've set targets for themselves already. So when they were able to see, okay, what is the impact of paying what we should be paid?
yeah,
They
yeah,
could see, okay, we're still within our targets. We're still like hitting, what we want to hit for the year, assuming that, disaster isn't going to strike. But
yeah. And great comment about the targets, because in the targets kind of comes full circle. That should also be influenced then by your strategy and your goals and your long-term plans, right? So back to those 3 key alignments. Well done, Sarah.
I'm learning. It's only taken 6 years.
That's just hey, but it's a good way to bring it all back full circle, right? It's how all those different pieces work together. So
The
yeah,
joy of the 3 key alignments is that we can literally talk ourselves in circles.
yeah,
It's very
yeah,
joyful.
yeah.
That is all I have for today. Gavin, any
Me too.
final Okay, we did it. We
Yeah,
did the thing.
no, yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. If you made it this far, you might also be an HR nerd, and I don't know, you can call me. We can talk about this stuff all day. I really hope that everyone who started the episode has stuck around to the end. This stuff is so important for, you know, building out the strategy on your farm, implementing good business practices. I mean, really, really important stuff. So thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I hope by now you know how to reach us, but if you don't, I mean, send us your thoughts, your comments, questions, whatever it might be. Voice notes, especially. We love getting those to Backswath's Instagram page. You can check out Backswath's website and reach out to Gavin and I directly there. However you consume media on the internet is really how you can find us. You just got to look. We would love to hear from you. Thanks again. And we've got some exciting episodes coming up. Maybe I'll take just 1 second to talk about the fact that we have real farmers coming on our podcast. I think people were starting to wonder if we knew any. You know, like we talk about farms all the time, but we weren't bringing farmers on. So we're doing that. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of episodes.
Me too.
So you got to come back. You got to tune in for more. Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of At the Fence Line with Sarah Chambers and Gavin Bedker. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode or would like to get in touch with us, please find us on Instagram at backswath_MGMT or through our website at www.backswath.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of Backswath or its affiliates. Any reference to specific products, services, organizations, or individuals does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Backswath.